I want to welcome Doug Henderson, friend, and also the guy who kind of holds things together around here. I can't compliment you enough. You do a great job. He basically is the man that holds down Progressive Radio Network. He's the director here. Doug, welcome.
You know, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I am very saddened. I'm very deeply moved by the death of Michael Jackson. And as I read the reports and watch the various and sundry television reports, Anderson, Cooper, Larry King seems to have come out of his grave for this. And I can't help but think about the role racism played in Michael Jackson's death. And by that I mean there have been various reports about his face being surgically altered and the coroner saying that there were 13 scars on his face. All that's from plastic surgery. And when people think of racism, oftentimes they think of maybe white on black racism or black on white racism. But there is a black on black racism that his family was telling Michael that he was too dark. They were telling him that his nose was too broad. But when you look at Michael, and I have the clips of when he was on Dick Clark's American Bandstand, when they were very popular, we're about the same age. And I remember in 5th grade when he came out with ABC and his other hit records, all the girls in school liked them. I mean, they were beautiful, beautiful kids.
Same thing. Yeah.
And something bad happened along the way. That being said, I heard the first part of the program in which you talked about how these scavengers, these opportunistic infections who pose as reporters are trying to get. They had a lady on, Anderson Cooper, last night who said that Michael called her for a drug. She hadn't been in touch with him for 3 months. People pop up out of the woodwork to try to benefit from this. They're scavengers, and they did that all his life. That's why a person whose body of work, in my opinion, is nonpareil, it's unmatched in the annals of American music. You look at his body of work. Now, Gary being Gary Null, loved Elvis. I love Jackie Wilson. They had short careers compared to Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Plus, Michael, as I mentioned the other day, in the 60s, the music coming on the heels of segregation in this country, the airwaves opened up. You had Motown, and in the late 50s, Berry Gordy was a songwriter for Jackie Wilson. And he wasn't paid enough, so he left and he formed Motown. And then music was beautiful. It was integrated. The Love Generation. You had Woodstock. You had Monterey International Pop Festival. You had other such shows where music was integrated. Then in the 70s, it became increasingly segregated until 1979, where it reached its peak, where it was completely, almost totally segregated. And then MTV came along in 1981. And what they did was they adopted the playlists from these segregated white pop stations and rock stations. So when you tuned into MTV, all you saw were white people. And if you were from another planet and you watched MTV, you would think that only white people made music.
It's true.
Every now and then you would see Jimi Hendrix, a clip of Jimi Hendrix. Then Michael came out with what I consider his magnum opus, his greatest work. But he has so many pieces of work that one could consider great, but his greatest. But he came out with Billie Jean. Still, the powers that be at MTV didn't want to play Billie Jean. Once they played it, it opened up the floodgates. It was that bad. It opened up. They played Michael, and they played other black artists. But what about the black artists that were denied access to MTV prior to that? You know, so he was Michael Jackson
He's the Jackie
was
Robinson of
he was Obama before Obama. He was Tiger Woods before Tiger Woods. He was Oprah before Oprah.
It's true.
And still, people, it's interesting when Gary on his show talks about Obama, and where need be, I defend Obama because I like Obama. There is one member in this audience from the West Coast. Oh, Doug, does he only like Obama because he's black?
Please.
The worst kind of racists are those who don't even know they're racist. They just, it says American is apple pie.
It's like the worst axe killer.
They don't think that it's normal. But that black man is standing up for another black man. And I made a joke that Bush couldn't read. Bush got into Yale on affirmative action. If you want to know the truth,
we were talking about that.
If you want to know the
with
truth, he
Clarence
did.
Thomas.
No, we talked about that earlier.
Clarence Thomas benefited from affirmative action. Once he got on the Supreme Court, he opposed it. You should do a program on affirmative action. I have some theories on it. But with Michael, he was in even the charges of pedophilia. None of them were proven, but those who accused him had shady pasts.
They certainly
and we
did.
can get into that. They did that for money, and he was vulnerable.
Boy, was pimped by his father.
He was pimped by his father, but the latter part, Michael really went downhill after the trial in which he was found not guilty. But you could see a decline in his health.
It was. He was traumatized.
He was traumatized.
That was one of the. You said there were certain turning points. Doug, that was one. It's unquestioned. You can't deny it. You can look at the body of work. That was a trauma for him, and a trauma defined as an injury. And when you have a sustained injury, the trauma has more of an effect, and that was a sustained injury. It's just like the shark feeding frenzy that these mass media typically do. Once they find a weakness, they just go in and they go in until they go in for the kill, which is ultimately what happened.
It's like on Martin Luther King's birthday, all I hear is, "I have a dream." Well, I don't think that Martin Luther King would have made that speech at the end of his life, especially after 1967 when he took his campaign up north and he found that the racism up north was much more virulent than the racism down south. It was overt down south, but it was covert here. And when they hit him in the head with a brick in Chicago in 1967, he had never seen anything like that. And people, I just want to say that Michael, you should examine him. I tune off the news, I turned off the news, and I listened to his music. We're in the day and age where the person can speak for themselves. I like Malcolm X. If I want to know about Malcolm X, I go to writings. I go to his words. Martin Luther King the same way. It's a little harder with Frederick Douglass or Sojourner Truth or other people. Denmark Vesey. It's a little harder, but there's no excuse to let people manipulate Dr. King into what you think he should have been. He was very eloquent, and he was a different Dr. King from August 28th, 1963, when he made the "I Have a Dream" speech, until April 3rd, April 3rd, 1968, when he made the "I've Been to the Mountaintop" speech. And that's a beautiful, beautiful speech. It's just like, if you want to know about Malcolm X, go to when he was in London at the Oxford University debate in December of 1964. Yes.
What about understanding the ethos of the Black Panther Party?
Same thing. I mean, it's not. I'm just using these as examples.
I'm just asking. Are you interested in understanding the ethos of the Black Panther Party?
I'm interested in learning about everything.
Okay,
yes,
that's good.
So that includes that, of course.
All right.
Yes.
You didn't mention that aspect, and I think that.
Yeah.
that
Well,
was
I didn't mention a lot of things. I mean,
I know.
I'm only here for a couple of minutes.
I understand.
But the absence shouldn't be interpreted. Yeah. Well, the Black Panther Party sprang out of Malcolm, in my opinion.
All right.
In my opinion, it sprang out of the Nation of Islam, which was formed in the early 30s, didn't really take root in the black communities until they had Malcolm, and Malcolm became a convert while he was in prison, and I think he got out in 1952 or so, and it took off. And certainly the Black Panther Party was very powerful, and Stokely Carmichael was a friend of mine. I didn't mention Stokely Carmichael. Brilliant man.
But I mentioned the ethos of the Black Panther Party for a purpose.
Okay, what?
And the purpose was, what were they about? You know, what was their philosophy? You see what I mean?
Yes.
Because their philosophy sort of like brings us into what are the conflicts going on in the society. Why are people desperate for integration and not understanding why integration is not really the goal that they needed, but rather realizing that it was a system in which they lived in that needed to be changed, as opposed to just integrating into the system that is really decadent. See, capitalism is really a decadent system, and one must try to grasp and understand that. Okay, what are those factors that makes it decadent? You see, the imperialists, the unending and unsatisfying need for wealth. You see, wealth and power over anyone, everyone, and that's the major contention with a capitalist system, and that's why I brought up trying to grasp an understanding of the ethos of the Black Panther Party.
One thing, if I can just intervene, that I have to say I loved about Michael, if you want to bring it back to the theme of today's show, and yet meld and wean in the Michael Jackson aspect of this, is he was one who believed in humanity. It wasn't about race. It was about humanity. Because all studies show, and I think all of us have at one point or another touched upon the fact that race is not what most people think it is. It's not something that you can identify on the outside. The real definition of race is at the core in the human genome. All studies show we all have hearts, we all have lungs, we all have livers. That is really the definition of race. And that's where Michael took it, which made him an activist, which is where I'm coming from. Basically, if I can summarize my piece of this, is Michael was an activist that he does not get recognition for through his music.
Yeah, as an addendum to that, I'd like to say that Michael's father said something at the BET Awards that he wished that Michael could be here to witness the love that they showed for him. And people in the media were making fun of him the last several years. But my best friend was in Paris when he got the news that Michael had died. Michael's popularity had never waned over there. I go to Sweden often. It had never waned there. And you find that in Europe, oftentimes, black musicians are successful there first before they are successful here. And Otis Redding with the Stax Tour. Jazz. I mean, going way back. Paul Robeson.
A number of
you can go back and back and back.
It's true.
And there's something, and I cannot help but think that race is a component in that equation.
I agree. We have about 30 seconds. Go ahead, Ron.
Notion to divide us in a way. This race smoke screen.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you know what? This has been intriguing, amazing dialogue. Nothing like spontaneity, and that's what's the beautiful thing about live radio is spontaneity. We thank the listeners of Progressive News Weekly for joining us once again. We hope everyone has a very safe and enjoyable weekend. Ron, believe me, the way we operate here,
yes,
we're going to ask you to come back after the program. Maybe you can even join us up, pick us up. We had Max Fraud-Wolf, our resident economist, in the wings, but this was important. This was critically important dialogue. Because you know what? We're not going to, I truly don't believe, Doug, we're going to get another Michael Jackson anytime soon. So he warranted this intervention, if you will, of this program. He absolutely warranted it. I know there are those who are sick in hearing it, but you know what? I take my hat off to this man. I wish it was Deepak who even said that. He epitomizes, and I have a lot of respect. I've read more books than I can count on one hand of Deepak's. He even said that this was an individual unlike anyone he had ever met. This is a quote, that truly subscribed to and attained his higher self. You know, take that and chew on it. That's what we all are here for. As a naturopath, I truly believe we're here to find out why we're here, and then to subscribe to that and pursue that.
And we won't get
If we all do that in our deepest core selves, we truly will be the human race that we're supposed to be.
You won't get a view of Michael Jackson and any other media and any other show than what we just did and we just brought out. Johnny, hear that on the mainstream media, and you won't. It's just here.
Doug, I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you,
appreciate
man.
you taking. I know you're a busy guy. You're
it's
so
a lively
busy.
show. Lively show.
I don't know how you're able to do it. You're always running, and I
just like to add that Michael, to me, represents the last link to the Jackie Wilsons, to the James Browns. Music I grew up on, music which I love, and as you know, I consider Jackie Wilson the greatest. And he just, it's gone. But in the BET Awards, they had singers from this generation pay homage to the OJs, and particularly ironic was that Eddie Levert, one of the lead singers of the OJs, lost 2 sons recently, and when he turned and he faced Joe Jackson, I mean, he said from his heart, he spoke from his heart.